Hi, I'm Harris Harrington, creator of depersonalizationrecovery.com. Today, I'm reviewing Feeling Unreal, Depersonalization Disorder and the Loss of the Self by Daphne Simeon and Jeffrey Abugel. So, this book is really the most well-known book on depersonalization disorder. And it's a really awesome book. It's really actually a great achievement by these authors, and it really deserves the recognition that it's gotten so far. It was featured in the film Numb, starring Matthew Perry, and it's a really great resource, and it's, in my opinion, the best book for understanding symptoms of depersonalization disorder. Symptomatology is described in detail, and they have a section on the history of symptoms, and it's really awesome for that. So I referenced this and studied this book for the creation of a program on depersonalization recovery that I made, and it was extremely helpful. Now, I read this right after I got depersonalization because I suffered depersonalization myself, and at first it sort of felt like it was painting a bleak picture of the disorder. Sort of felt kind of hopeless. Although it was very detailed and from an academic perspective, it was very well written, and amazing citation of sources and etc. But at the same time accessible to the lay reader. It didn't really point the way towards hope very well. Although it does mention people recovering, it doesn't really talk about the recovery process. So in that, it's weak. But I don't think the authors intended to paint a bleak picture. I think what the intention was, or I'm not sure if this was the intention, but what I really got the sense of when I read this was that they were trying to validate the emotions that people feel when they're depersonalized. So they really focused on, the symptoms of depersonalization, not so much on recovery. So that was the weakness. But there were hints of the path of recovery put in this book. And because I've read so much on dissociation, when I looked at it again and read it over again, I realized, oh man, there's a lot of great stuff in this book for recovery that points the way to recovery. And they talk about, in the chapter on psychotherapy treatment of depersonalization, towards the end of the book, they talk about psychodynamic approach to overcoming depersonalization and cognitive behavioral therapy, and for overcoming depersonalization, and how those methods worked for certain people. And that was really helpful for me once I knew what I was looking at. But if you read this book and you get sort of a bleak feeling about depersonalization, you shouldn't really feel that. And I actually recommend go to my site, and I talk a ton about recovery. But this book really complements the program that I made on depersonalization, because it really talks in just hundreds of pages of detail about symptoms. And it also talks about the origin of depersonalization in emotional abuse. Daphne Simeon has actually she's a researcher and clinician, of course, and has done studies on how emotional abuse is extremely highly correlated with the onset and predisposition towards depersonalization disorder. So people experience emotional abuse, and those people are more likely to get depersonalization. And so she talks about that, and they do case studies in here talking about families and dysfunctional families and things like that. But the problem is that if this is the first book you've read on depersonalization and you haven't read a lot about psychology, a lot of times the really important bits aren't really highlighted very well in this book. They're there, but you need an educated eye to really see the really important things in terms of recovery, because they kind of get lost just sort of in the symptom descriptions. But overall, it's an awesome book, and if you have depersonalization, I do recommend that you get a copy of this book. But just don't be dissuaded from your attempts at recovery by the bleak sort of feeling you get from this book, because there is a lot of hope in recovering from depersonalization, because it's an extremely treatable disorder. But I highly recommend this book.